Hey y'all, it's Barry with Grown Roots Farm. Some of you who know me personally would know that I've done quite a bit of woodworking over the last 10 or so years. Sold a lot of different woodworking custom made stuff. And the current project is going to be a very large walnut, all walnut live edge slab for a table. So I milled this up for a friend of mine, an acquaintance of mine. He had a walnut log fall on his property some time back. I milled this up in 2023, and I'm going to show you right here. So it's this section. It's all that there. Okay, I'm going to be using, I think those two are the main ones. And then this one's going to be a middle. I'm having to take some of the quarter sawn grain right there on the perimeter and rip about a 6-inch strip, maybe a little bit wider than that, and join basically 3 slabs together with the edges being live edge. This is a very large slab. It is, right now, from end to end, it's a little over 11 feet. I think it's 11 and a half feet long. It is super heavy. The top one is right around 2 inches thick. The two other ones that I'm going to be joining with it are around 2 1/4 or 2.5 inches thick. I think 2 1/4. So I'm going to try and get them all around. I'm going to try and keep them as thick as I can. Hopefully around 1 3/4 inches when it's all said and done. Somewhere around that size, I hope. But I've ran a lot of material through the Woodmaster. This is a 25-inch planer. It's also a molder, gang rip saw, and drum sander. Although 99% of the time I'm using it as a large planer. Reason being is really anything that comes off my sawmill can be ran through that. The trick is to get this flat is I've got to create a jig. So the way I'm going to set this jig up is I take a 24-inch wide piece of MDF and I put the slab on top of it, and then I shim it up. I typically will hot glue it, and sometimes I'll screw it up from underneath. I'll screw it together from the underside, keep it all to where when it runs through the planer, it's at a level spot. Then once I get that planed on top, I can take the jig off, flip it over, and run it back through the planer, and I can do that with all 3 of these slabs I've got to do, and that will create a nice flat surface for me to be able to join. Okay, so here's the mirror image. These are the two. These were consecutive slabs on the log, so they mirror each other. See how you got the knots the same. It's got this one hole the same on each of those, and the knots there. It's all one big piece. That is right around 34 inches wide. Obviously, I'm going to have to put a piece out of this one. I'm going to try and match the grain as best as possible. Rip out about 6 to 8 inches off of this one. The customer needed the table to be wider than this 34 inches. They have a very large family, and it's understandable. I think with the grain pattern, I think I can take about a 6-inch piece, put it in the center between that, and then glue everything up together where the live edges are still out on the edges, and I think it'll look pretty good. It's just the hardest part with this project is honestly, it's the size. These slabs are still super heavy, although probably half the weight they were when they were wet or green lumber. But now they are still very heavy. I will say they dried out pretty flat. So I know it looks like there's a bunch of twists in this. This is because I don't have it on a level surface right now. But they're fairly flat. So hopefully it doesn't take me too many passes on the planer here once I get the jig set up to be able to get these things flat so I can take them off the jig. And here's the jig I'm going to use. Normally, that right there, that crack to there, that's an 8-foot piece of MDF, 24 inches wide. I added another 4 foot because these slabs are 11.5 foot long. So I'm going to put the slabs on here and then shim them up. And then I'm absolutely going to have some help from my boys to get this thing set up using the sawhorses and setting this thing up to run on the planer. Even with that help and even with the sawhorses, it is going to be a challenge. And I'm going to make very light passes on that on this planer. I typically only go on this, for any of you that may have one of these, I typically only go one rotation on this down at a time. That equates to a 1/16 of an inch. So 1/16 of an inch is not very much. The planer handles it pretty well, and then you can control the speed down there. Talk about maxing out my workspace. So this setup, this jig is 12 feet long. I barely have enough room down here. Yes, it's on a little bit of a slope going in, but that's okay. As it feeds in, it'll be all right. And then we're barely going to have enough room coming over here towards the miter saw. It's going to be a really tight fit. And we're starting with the smaller of the boards. When I shimmed these up, I've got just a few shims. This is going to be the top piece of the table. So underside, I just screw some shorter screws into the bottom to hold it in place instead of using hot glue. Especially with this heavy of a project, it's going to work a lot better if I've got the screws holding it. And just as long as they're not long enough that the planer blades are going to hit it. But make sure, take your time and make sure you've got this thing shimmed to where it's not rocking back and forth. And then as it feeds through, it all stays flat. That way it gives you a nice flat surface on top when it comes through. Yeah, about to get this thing started. We'll see how it goes. So we got a little bit of curl, just different figure. See that there? Always around the knots, okay? And I like this cool stripe going up through there. You got stripes running through. It has a really pretty piece of walnut. Probably, more than likely, throw a little epoxy in there. It's a really pretty piece. And we have the mirror image right here left to run through. The book matched piece that went to it. So I think we may not even have to go down a 16th, maybe a 30. Well, gets a little deep right there. Maybe a 16th. We'll do one more pass like that, and that should be good and flat. All right, after some hard work, a lot of back breaking, lifting, Thank goodness I thought ahead for once and built some sawhorses. We had 2 sawhorses on each side for the infeed and the outfeed on the planer, and it was still quite a bit to lift the MDF sheet that was our jig, plus the walnut through at 2¼ inch thick and 11.5 feet long, and they're like 18 inches, 20 inches in some spot wide. Heavy pieces. I'm not sure what it weighs, but it's a lot. But either way, this is an idea. So this is just to give an idea what it's going to look like. This has not been jointed. This has not been jointed. And the only surface right now that's been trued is the top. The bottom still has yet to run back through the planer and square it all up. I guarantee, even though I do that, I've done tables a number of times now, even once they run through and I join them, there's still a lot of hand plane work and sanding that needs done. Hopefully that's all I need. I hope I don't have to build a router table or router sled with a flattening jig on this to flatten it all out. But I am pretty pleased with this. This middle section here, I cut it wide. I'm probably going to rip about 2 inches off here. I don't think I'll need the entirety, but I think if I rip about 2 inches off, that'll put us to roughly 42 inches wide. The thing, if you notice down here at the end, just attention to detail, if I take 2 inches off, I get rid of this knot, and the grain pattern is a little wavy, but it avoids this knot and then goes down into some figure. I think it would look better if it didn't have that one knot down there at the end. The rest of this is all book matched, like I've said. I think it's pretty cool. You got kind of this darker pinstripe running there, darker pinstripe over here running in conjunction with it. Because it's book matched, you got the knot hole here that matches with that one. You got this knot hole here that matches, and then we got this odd spot right here. Not entirely sure what I'm going to do with this yet. Whether or not I patch this, you know, it looks like some tight grain here, and cut it out and try to insert some tight grain walnut into there and patch it over and glue it all up and see if we can make that work. Either that or maybe some epoxy. Not entirely sure yet, but we'll figure that out. And then maybe epoxy down here. I'm keeping it long, although this section here is probably going to be getting cut off. That section right there will likely get cut off. But from a preliminary standpoint on this table, there's a few things I got to fix. And I'm not sure if we'll even keep this length. It might even be cut a few inches here on this end. I did get, with these slabs as heavy as they were, I did get some snipe. I don't know if it's coming across on the video, but I did get some snipe on the boards. So if I cut it right there down, that would eliminate the snipe, and that would eliminate most of this crack. But yeah, this is some gorgeous walnut. I think it's going to turn out really well like this. Just got to get these jointed and the bottom sides planed, and kind of work it all up from there. But so far it's looking pretty good. We did have some issues with that jig. I've used an MDF, an 8-foot sheet of MDF, and shimmed it and hot glued it and screwed it together before, and I've done that on numerous projects, and I've always gotten a really nice, true, flat surface. This time, because these were so long, we needed a 12-foot long jig. I took an MDF sheet, an 8-foot, and then I cut down a 4-foot section and tied them together with some wood strips on like some rails. Well, I don't know if it was just the length or maybe even the weight. These slabs were super heavy. and just the weight on the weight was kind of causing a little bit of a bow with everything. We were trying to keep it as flat as possible, but the center piece that we had just came out a little, it's got a little dip in it. I'm going to have to plane all that out by hand once this is all done. I think it's going to be very minuscule, but it's just the jig, I guess, having those pieces together and having that big of a slab that I was trying to joint essentially the top of it. Like I said, I've done it a bunch with smaller projects and I've had no issues. And when I say smaller, I mean like 8 foot, like, you know, not that far off. I've done 8-foot slabs on it multiple times and it's always come out just fine. So this was a little bit of a learning curve as far as just the length and the weight of this slab. But it is gorgeous and I can't wait to keep working on this and get this thing eventually delivered to its customer. It's going to be an eye-popping piece, hopefully. You all have a good one.